Now, for this approach of adding tabs, we of course wouldn't have needed a stateful widget here though. A stateless widget would have done the trick because we're not managing any state. That will change when we add tabs at the bottom because that simply works a bit different. Why? Well, simply because the Flutter team wants it to work like this. There, you won't use the default tab controller. Instead, now we'll remove the default tab controller here and therefore return the scaffold in the tabs screen. That's where I am. Return the scaffold here. Remove the redundant parentheses, the closing parentheses. And now on that scaffold, if you want to have tabs at the bottom, you don't add them here on the app bar. So you get rid of that bottom argument here on the app bar where you added the tab bar. That's removed. And you also don't have a tab bar view as your body. Instead, let's ignore the body for now. I'll come back to that. Instead, you will add a bottom navigation bar. That's what a tab bar at the bottom is called. And for that, you have the bottom navigation bar widget, which you can add. Like this. It's also built into Flutter, and it adds a navigation bar at the bottom, as the name suggests. Now, this navigation bar needs some configuration to look good and to work correctly. For example, you can set the background color of the bottom navigation bar. And here I'll use my primary color for that. So primary color like this. Now, of course, you also want to add your items here. And items now are the tabs. So items now are bottom navigation bar items. And whilst the name sounds strange, that in the end is just a tab. Now, just as the tabs we had before, you typically have an icon there, which takes an icon widget, which then uses the icons collection here, so to say, to select the icon. And here I will use category. And you assign a title, which now is a widget and not plain text. But typically here you use a text widget, of course, to set the text you want to display on that tab. And here I'll have categories. Now, of course, we'll not just have one navigation bar item, but two. So let's add a second one. There I'll use the star icon and say favorites as a text. Now we have two bottom navigation bar items in our bottom navigation bar. And now comes the part that is the biggest difference compared to the tabs that we added at the top below our app bar. For the bottom navigation bar, you manually have to control what the user selected and which content you want to display. So for that, on the bottom navigation bar itself, you register a on tab listener, and that is triggered whenever an item is selected. Now on tab should execute a method, and I'll add a new method here. Of course, you could also use an anonymous function if you wanted to, but I'll use a method here which doesn't return anything, which I'll name select page underscore select page because we're in a private class here. And select page here will receive the index automatically that's passed into this method by Flutter of the tab that was selected. So we now bind underscore select page to on tab, and that tells Flutter that select page should be executed when a tab is selected. And as I just said, Flutter will then automatically give you the index of the selected tab so that you know if it was the first or the second or the third or whatever you have tab. Now you know what was selected, but now you need to control what's displayed. And for that, you should manage your own list of widgets which you want to render. So for that, I'll add a new property, a list of widgets up there. And I'll name that pages, underscore pages. You can name this whatever you want. And in there, I want to have the two, in my case, in this app here, two widgets which should be shown. And that's, of course, the categories screen, which I want to create here. And that's, of course, the favorites screen, which I want to create. And I just noticed that the import for the favorites screen is not in the format I wanted. So let me quickly fix that. Okay. So now we have that pages list here with the two pages I want to have. And we can set this to a final list, of course, because I'm not going to change that. And now one other piece of information is which page was selected, because this is basically giving us the data we want to use, but we also need to know which data to use. So I'll add another property, not a final one though, an integer, which is selected page index, which is 0 initially, let's say. And here in underscore select page, in this method, I call set state. And now here, that's why we need a stateful widget, because we will manually switch that index and we want to update what's shown on the screen whenever that happens, because we want to switch the widget that is displayed. So here in set state, I'll set selected page index equal to the index I'm getting as an argument here. So equal to the index of the tab that was clicked. So with that, we can now use the pages and the selected page index here to display a content in our body. Because in the body, we can now use pages, and that's a list, and there we simply access the selected page index like that. And remember, pages is simply a list of widgets, instantiated widgets. So we do output our widget here then in the body, depending on which tab was selected. Let's give it a try and let's restart this application. And now we see one tab here. If I click on it, indeed we go to the favorites. And if I click on the left here, indeed I also see that other tab here. It's just having the same color as the background. So we'll have to do some styling, but in general, it works. In general, we can switch between our tabs here at the bottom. So let's now work on the styling. So on that bottom navigation bar, we set the background color for the overall bar. You can also set the unselected item color and set that to colors white, for example. If you do that and you restart the application, you indeed see that now favorites is at least a bit easier to see. But still, one problem we have is that when I select it, somehow it's not treated as selected. The other one does not get visible, and the selected item would be nice to see anyways. So back in our configuration, we can of course also add a color to the selected item with selected item color. And there I want to use my accent color that's set up in the theme. If I save this now, categories is a bit more visible, because now we have that yellow look. Now still it would be nice if favorites would actually be marked as active when I click on it though. And for that you need to pass some additional information to the bottom navigation bar. Since you manage the selection manually, you manage the tabs manually, you need to feed that information, which tab is selected, back into the bottom navigation bar. And that's done by setting the current index. This tells the bottom navigation bar which tab is actually selected. So here, I set this equal to selected page index, of course. And now with that, we can actually switch here and we do see changes. And you see you get a nice little effect here automatically where the font size also increases when you select the item. You can of course also control that effect here with selected font size and with unselected font size. Set these to equal and you will see no change in font size. One other effect you can add to these tabs here is you can set the type of that bottom navigation bar, and you can set this to bottom navigation bar type shifting. If you set that to shifting, you see the style changed, and now we have a nice animation here though. Now when you have a shifting bottom bar, you simply need to style a couple of other arguments, or with the help of a couple of other arguments, to get the same look we had before. When using type shifting, then you actually need to style your bar items on the bottom navigation bar item itself by giving that a background color, which now could be your primary color here. And of course do that on both bottom navigation bar items. And with that, they have their background color back, because now every item needs to be styled separately. And with that, you can also use this shifting setup where you have no labels on the unselected item and only see them on the selected items, here with that little effect. Now it depends on what you prefer. I'll not use shifting here. Instead, I'll either set it to fixed, but that's the default, so I'll just comment that out. And therefore just go with, the static approach here where we have these tabs. And that's the other way of adding tabs. Here we control the indexes on our own. What's the same as with the tabs in the app bar, however, is that the content we display here is essentially now just an embedded widget. I still call these widgets, the favorites screen and the categories screen, screens because they control the majority of the screen, the main content, but they don't control the entire screen anymore. For example, the app bar and the tab bar, of course, importantly, is now controlled by our tabs screen. Now, if you navigate here, of course, you still have the same behavior as before, though, but on that overview screen, you now have the tabs. To finish this off, let's make sure we also change the title up there, though, depending on which tab was selected. You can do that here in the tabs screen by simply tweaking our pages list a little bit. Instead of just storing a list of widgets, why don't we store a list of maps here, where we have string keys and then we have dynamic values, which means we don't know the exact type, or object values, which also basically means we don't know which kind of object. And therefore now here we have maps, where we have a page key that holds our widget, but where we also have a title key which holds the title we want to show in the app bar. And that could be categories here. And for the other widget, we also have page, of course, but then here we have title, and there we could say your favorites and close that, of course, as well. And now with that, we have our list of maps up there. And when we now select a page here in the body, we of course don't output the page's selected page index because that would be a map. But instead on that map, we access the page key because the page key is in our map what holds the widget. And we now can also use the title here in our app bar title. Instead of having the hard-coded meals here, we can use the pages property, access the selected page index, and then there the title key, which holds our string title. And with that, if we save this, and this restarts, we now have a setup where if you watch the title at the top, this title changes as I switch the tabs. So this is how you could also update the title dynamically. And of course, you can store any data you want in this map. So if you also would want to add some action buttons dynamically to the app bar, you could add a actions key here, which holds your list of widgets, which are all the flat buttons or whatever you have you want to add as action widgets in the app bar. So you can really add whatever you want here and then therefore load the data and use the data down there that you need to load and use based on the selected tab.